You want some bad news, Michael?
No.
What are you asking me?
You're the guru of the gray matter. I figured if anybody had it, you'd have the answer.
I can't give you any direction.
I think I'm going to have to change this channel. I'm sorry.
You're completely wrong.
I refuse to be wrong on 2 calls in a row.
Tell me I'm spot on or tell me I'm crazy as all get out.
I have no idea.
I have a 6-month-old, so we'll be raising him according to Dr. Ray.
Talk about being a winner.
So, you want my question?
You ain't making any sense.
You're absolutely right. I just needed confirmation.
So what are you going to do about it, Dawn?
I'm calling you.
Now, from the studios of Living Bread Radio Network in Canton, Ohio, the hometown of Mother Angelica, here's Dr. Ray.
Very nice to have you with me. Old-fashioned dad trapped in an aging psychologist's body. Nevertheless, it's really not hard to do this program. People ask me, when are you going to retire? In a way, I'm already in semi-retirement. I've noticed, pretty much decided, that somebody comes in the office, I nod about every 8 minutes instead of every 4 when I used to be at my professional peak. Every 4 minutes I would nod acceptingly and understandingly. Now it's every 8 minutes. And if I were to say something like, I see what you're saying. Oh, I can understand that. That must be difficult. I charge extra for that. That is overt empathy. Passive empathy, nodding your head, no extra charge for that. But if I have to say things like, oh my, how difficult that must be. That's extra. That's extra empathy. Now here on the program, I just listen most of the time. I don't say things like, oh my. Now, sometimes I will say yikes. Yikes is big. It's a carryover from when I was 12, which is really kind of where I peaked maturity-wise. This particular variant of The Doctor Is In is called Look Back Friday. According to my producer man, Andrew Kruchek, we've been doing Look Back Friday for, Andrew, what is it, 11, 12 years now? I would have guessed 6. Which typically whenever you look back on when something was, you calculate it at about half of when it really was. So Look Back Friday's been around for 11 years. Of course, Andrew, he doesn't stay in the studio when we replay a particular call because he goes out and then he comes back in. Because he says, I've listened to these calls. This will be the 3rd time. The first time when they came in, the 2nd time when I edit them, and the 3rd time when we replay them for Look Back Friday, and then you, Ray, comment. You extrapolate. You add something to the call. You go in a direction you didn't go in when the call was first brought up. Sometimes there are words in the call I want to define. Sometimes there are questions I would have wanted to ask, but obviously this is not therapy, so didn't have the time to ask them. Most of the time you have to focus on what the caller is asking or for them is the main struggle or main observation or main, excuse me for this psychobabble, issue. Prefer the word matter. But sometimes, and this is, I'd say about a third of the calls for various reasons. All the calls could be replayed and you could talk about them from various perspectives, but about a third of them lend themselves to certain particular things that would be helpful to either reiterate or expand upon. So that is sort of what Look Back Friday is for. When I write, I've always admired Paul Harvey. Paul Harvey was a master of the turn of the phrase. He'd say things like, wash your ears out with this. Not all marriages are slip knots. Just a wonderful turn of phrases, images that he would use. He wrote his own material. And I always admired his style. Now, to write in that style takes a lot of work. I will edit something 10 times before I get the turn of the phrase that I wanted, or say it in the way that I wanted, or have some kind of snappy sentence. It's much easier just to write a narratively correct sentence. So, in that sense, I try to find ways to convey a thought, an idea. In a couple of my books, I've talked about PAP, Personal Apology Percentage. Now, I made that up. Okay, that was my own acronym. And the personal apology percentage is my own idea now, as far as I know. I've never read it anywhere else. What does it mean? How wrong do you think, that's the key word here, how wrong do you think you have to be before you apologize? What percentage of blame, if you will motivate you to apologize? For most people, the minimal percentage is 50. You have to be at least half at fault. If you think the other person is more at fault than you, then you may think things like, well, I'll apologize when they do. I'm not all wrong. I didn't start it. But a Christian should have a very low personal apology percentage. Did you do anything wrong? Well, I may have, but gee, the other person was by far more wrong. I mean, I sat there and I didn't say a word for 16 minutes as my uncle went on a diatribe about my political views or my religion. I didn't say a word. I know what he's like. And then you unleashed something like, don't you ever get tired of being so ignorant? Now, if we divide the percentage up, your personal apology percentage, according to the amount of words expended on each part, it's probably under 2%. I mean, you sat quiet for 16 minutes. You didn't say a word. You were heroic in your tolerance or in your unwillingness to shoot anything back. The question is, were you snarky? Were you disrespectful? I may have been disrespectful, but he was 20 times as disrespectful of me. True. That's true. No argument there. Does your apology depend upon how wrong he was or how wrong you were? You were wrong. You shouldn't have said it. You know that. Well, if I apologize, he's going to think I'm the wrong one and he's not even going to look at himself. That's not your concern. Your concern is, were you wrong? Uncle, I shouldn't have said that. I'm sorry. That was wrong. I shouldn't have said it. That was bad. Now you said it. You apologized for what you did. Now, if he chooses to interpret that as, well, I'm glad you realize, because that's exactly what you're like, you can't do anything about that. Your motive is to apologize when you are wrong, not linking it to how wrong the other person is. That paralyzes marriages. So often, somebody does not offer an apology when they said things they shouldn't have said, or when they cussed, or when they name-called, and they don't apologize. Why? Because they're justified, because the other person did as much or more. So I don't need to. Yes, you do. If you're wanting to follow Christian principles anyway. You say, I'm sorry for what you should be sorry for. The fact that they're not going to apologize for what you believe in, your assessment is 82% of the problem, is kind of irrelevant. Dr. Ray, you're just unrealistic. People don't do that. Well, I know they don't, of course. Should you? That's the question. A personal apology percentage for a Christian should be very, very low. It should basically be, whatever I did wrong, I will apologize for, independent of what the other person did wrong, independent of how hard they pushed, independent of what they were like, independent of what they said, independent of what they did, I'm going to apologize for me. That's a hard one. Okay, when we come back, Andrew Kruchek will take me through to our first look back call. This is Dr. Ray. The doctor is out.
You're listening to The Doctor. Come in, pull up a couch, let's talk. The doctor is in.
Very nice to have you with me here. The doctor is in, boldly going where no brain has gone before. Those of you old enough to remember the original Star Trek series where Captain Kirk usually, if he had an off day, he only saved a particular galaxy. But when he was really, really at peak, he'd save the universe. And he'd get the girl while he was doing it, too. Original Star Trek, boldly going where no brain has gone before. Look back Friday, our first call. Let me look at that time there. Yeah, I got time for that call. Brian from Kentucky is struggling, as many, many parents now do, with this particular moral issue. His 20-year-old son moving in with a girlfriend. He's moving out with his girlfriend, huh?
Yeah, and he knows how we feel. I mean, he's been raised Catholic school, and I can't get the idea of what the rush is. Why not to take it in the proper steps? But that's the decision that they're making. So now I'm faced with, I feel even reserved to even try to help him move. You know what I mean? I don't want to facilitate, but I don't want to break all my ties. I know I've got to be able to stay in touch with them to keep and the influence that I feel like is going to be good for him in the long run, but it's kind of a slippery slope, it feels like.
How old is he, Brian?
He's 20.
How old's the girl?
18.
Okay.
They're both, she graduated high school last year.
Has he explained to you why he thinks this is perfectly fine, especially given the way he was raised?
It started, he was wanting to get an apartment to get out on his own, to see what it was like to take care of himself, and then all of a sudden, and it turned into she was going with him. I feel like at times maybe she kind of crowded her way in there, but I'm not exactly sure, to be honest with you. I feel like he's a soft-hearted guy, loving the death, but he's going to tell me kind of what I want to hear, maybe instead of exactly what's going on. So, but whenever I asked him, I was like, I thought you were going to do this on your own. His reply was, well, I was going to, but after we talked about it, it just seems like I'd like for her to be there. I'd like for her to be there with me.
So he doesn't see this as he doesn't see this as anything of contrary to his Catholic faith.
He knows better than that. Yeah, he knows that it's contrary.
But he isn't of the mind to let the contrary stop him.
That's the way. Yeah, that's what it seems.
Does your wife see this bit differently?
My wife feels like we had this conversation just a little bit earlier, that she's been robbed here. She said, I'm supposed to be excited. I'm supposed to be helping him make this transition, and now it's tainted, and I don't want, she's with me. She doesn't want to act like that. Oh, yes, this is perfectly fine. We'll help you, because we don't think that it's best for them. She's struggling with it.
You raised your son in the faith as you thought best and as you knew best. This culture is absolutely devastating at pulling kids from the faith. Beyond comprehension, devastating. 50, 60, 70 years ago, for example, there would have been much more pushback for Brian moving in with his girlfriend. Wasn't anywhere near as common. Now, not only is it common, but it's applauded. Everybody thinks that's absolutely great. Whatever you want, Brian, whatever makes you feel good, whatever you pursue, that's all up to you, son. So the culture is just no longer on your side at all anymore, Brian. So given that, you guys aren't failures at all. You were asked to raise your son in the faith, and you did so. The culture is absolutely seductively vicious at pulling people away from the faith. So that said, I personally would agree with you, and I would do the same thing. I would not help him move in. And he knows why. See, Brian? Or, I'm sorry, you're Brian. Your son. I don't know your son's name. What's his name there, Brian?
Alan.
Alan? I'd say, Alan,
Yes.
love you, but I don't think this is good for you, and certainly goes against the way you were raised in the faith. So I'm not going to help you move in. I'm not going to say, okay, good. I still love you. Still going to have a relationship with you. Have a relationship with your girlfriend. That's right. You're welcome to come here to our house. We're not going to shun you. But I'm not going to support you financially. That's me. That's what I would do. I say I'm not doing that. But every other way, I love you, and I will still have a relationship with you. I think your question is, what if she takes my loving connection as condoning it, as agreeing with it, right?
Yeah, that's part of my concern.
Nah, you're not doing that. You raised him, Brian. He knows how you think. He knows what you believe. You raised him. He knows himself. Go ahead.
We had we've already had the conversation of, this is, I won't be able to do certain things that I would be happy to do otherwise.
Okay.
And I think that's upsetting him, obviously, to the extent of, I told him where he's moving into, he doesn't have a place to do laundry. You can come back to the house and do laundry. But whenever it came to the two of them, I was like, okay, I told you could come back here and do your laundry, but I don't really want you to bring her laundry back here to do it, because that's crossing the line. And I know that it's hurting, it's kind of demeaning our relationship to a certain extent, but I guess it's going to pass in time, but it's just, it seems difficult at the moment. It got me questioning myself, for sure.
Well, he's got you questioning yourself because he's giving you the message that, hey, Dad, you need to totally approve and celebrate and support everything we do, because if you don't, I'm going to be upset, and I'm going to think that you are shunning me emotionally. That's how he's interpreting it. He's wrong. And we now live in a culture, and he's of that generation that says, if you don't completely applaud and approve of whatever I do, especially sexually, then you are judging me, you are not supporting me, you are not on my side, etc., etc., etc. And that's how he's choosing to view that. One of the broader side issues that came up from this call is what I call the inconvenience of the faith. I'm perfectly willing to declare myself Catholic, and I'm perfectly willing to believe that I am a faith-filled Catholic until it clashes with something I morally wish to ignore, until a church teaching becomes very inconvenient. Now, in this case, Brian's son, if you talk to him, he would probably say something like, I'm a good Catholic. I love the church. I go to church. I go to communion, which is another issue, which I'll get to in a moment. But this particular thing does not apply to his faithfulness. I see this among so many Catholics I know in my own social circle. They would consider themselves very faith-filled, practicing Catholics, but yet, and it's usually in the realm of relationships and marriage and sexuality, where they've decided that this particular Catholic teaching is not something that they would want to adhere to because it just goes against what they so much want to do. I have people in my life that I know don't go to church at all, rarely. And I know that they're living in many ways counter to some of the core moral teachings of the Catholic Church. I'm not there to judge them, the state of their soul. I'm simply observing that they don't really embrace all the teachings of the church in a moral way. Significant teaching of the church. If I see them, for whatever the reason, at Christmas Mass or a funeral Mass or some setting where communion is offered, they get up and go. Their view is, I'm entitled to this. I've been raised Catholic. I still like the Catholic Church. I don't have anything against her. I just ignore her when it suits my purposes. It's very common now. That is a mindset that is just taken over so much of religious practice in our culture. Gallup did a poll, and he surveyed Christians and non-Christians on their lifestyles, on their beliefs. And what he found was that those who call themselves Christian really behave not much differently in the culture than those who don't consider themselves faith-filled Christians or practicing Christians. He said, with the exception of what he called living saints, he said that was approximately 10% of the people who truly wanted to adhere to the historic moral teachings of not only the Catholic Church, but Christianity. But he said it was a small percentage. And I see that in my own life. And I think that's where Brian's son is. He would still be considered a very faith-filled Catholic until this girl entered his life and they decided, for our purposes, this is the more convenient thing to do, this is the more loving thing to do, this is the more financial thing to do. It just overall is a better thing to do. I'm going to address this a little bit more too when I get back.
This is Life News Radio. I'm Jim Anderson, a well-published proponent of abortion and open opponent of pro-life activism in America, has decided to decline a leadership position at the University of Notre Dame. Susan Osterman will remain a professor at the school, but declined the appointment to direct the Liu Asia and Asian Studies Institute. A rosary with students earlier this week was led by Bishop Kevin Rhodes, and a campus candlelight vigil has been scheduled for Friday evening. UK Right to Life says assisted suicide, facing massive opposition, is widely expected to fail in British Parliament. While there are technically a few days later this year for consideration, the government says it will not be committing any more time to legalizing the grisly practice. Proponents have been accused of using arranged dying as a cost savings for the nation's program of socialized medicine. This is Life News Radio. Imagine you providing one needy family a lifetime of clean water for $98. The global impact of cross-Catholic outreach lets miracles like this happen. From disaster relief to training farmers, the development of micro-enterprise, education, and health. It's no wonder Cross-Catholic has the endorsement of so many noted bishops. Discover more and find ways to unlock a bright future for those in need. Visit crosscatholic.org. crosscatholic.org. In other stories, an Irish man violently coerced an abortion pill abortion and is now serving an 11-year prison sentence for it. And the image of baby Samuel, abandoned with no comfort after a failed abortion, has gone viral and sparked pro-life protest, especially in Australia. Abortion industry efforts to censor the image have failed. For pro-life headlines delivered to your email address daily, sign up at lifenews.com. This has been Life News Radio.
I want to look back on my look back. Brian's son, 20 years old, moving in with his girlfriend. Son, up to this point, was seemingly embracing the Catholic Church's teachings. But as I said before the break, if you were listening, some of you just got in your car right now and you weren't listening. You're saying, I don't know what he's talking about. That's okay, because some of the times I don't know what I'm talking about, and I even listen. He's moving in with his girlfriend because it's what he wants to do. And to adhere to Catholic moral teaching on this would be very inconvenient. And I talked about that. But one of the other points I wanted to make about this, and I think this is what hit Dad real hard. The son wanted to do laundry at their house, his laundry and his girlfriend's laundry. Parents refused. I understand that. It's one thing to keep up a warm, loving relationship with you, even though you're acting in a way that obviously you weren't raised that way and morally we certainly don't agree with. But it's quite another to say, well, I'm going to make it easy for you to act that way. But what happened, and Brian pointed this out, and I think this speaks to a broader issue, which is now a dominant mindset in our culture. Son was upset because mom and dad did not want to allow their laundry services to include the girlfriend. In other words, she could wash our stuff at your house, Dad. It is what I call defining the relationship. You need to do these things as I put them before you. You have to check these boxes. And if you don't check one of the boxes that I have defined your loving acceptance of, then you don't accept. Then you're intolerant, then you're judgmental. And that's what his son seems to have done. You don't let my girlfriend that I'm living with wash her stuff at your house, then you're not loving us. You're not accepting. You're intolerant. And it struck me how often that happens. I decide whether you are being loving, kind, accepting to the degree that you can, according to your morals, and accepting, in this case, meant they're not going to allow them to wash their stuff at our house, and we're not going to move you out and help you move in with her. Okay. But that was viewed as, well, therefore, you're not accepting. Because I defined the terms. It struck me when Brian was talking that one element, my girlfriend can't wash her clothes at your house. Now, I don't know the details of this regarding why they wouldn't go to a laundromat, probably to save money to go to mom and dad's house, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And Brian said, my wife and I are of the same accord. That's redundant. Of one accord. They can't do that. Immediately, the son took it as, you see, you really don't accept me. You really don't accept my girlfriend. It's not a matter of me loving you. Our culture cannot wrap its head around that idea. That I can love you. I can care about you without accepting or approving what you do. And further, if the Catholic Church is right, and there is all kinds of secular research that supports her, Father Spitzer's book, The Moral Wisdom of the Catholic Church, does a masterful job of citing studies that say the further you drift from the way the church says to do it. Now, these studies would not point to the church. They would just point to the problems that are incurred by ignoring or being unaware of or rejecting the church's teaching. The more complications you bring on your life. So, Brian's son moving in with his girlfriend, who knows what complication that will bring? Will there be a pregnancy? And will they break up? Very, very, very likely. They're much more likely to break up than they are to get married. So if there's a pregnancy, now there's a child. So we have 2 decades of trying to figure out how to get along, and Brian's son paying child support, and how do we negotiate who gets the child when and where, and what happens if it's hostile, and what happens if she marries some other guy. All these complications could be easily brought about by him moving in with his girlfriend. So it isn't just a matter of morally it's not good. It's just not smart. It risks all kinds of complications which become more likely as they live together. So for Brian's dad to say, this is not good, it isn't simply a moral question. It is a question of stable existence. It is a question of running your life well. It is a question of unanticipated consequences. How often this now happens. We live together. We break up. We have a child. What happens with the child? How do we solve this? Where do we go through it? What's the navigations? All of this. And then we both move on to have other relationships with other children. And you can't tell the players without a scorecard. So for Brian saying to his son, this isn't something we can applaud or approve of, simply because, son, you think it's the best move to make right now, morally and simply personally, it's a bad move. It would be like me saying, well, as long as you're happy, do whatever you wish. Because your happiness is only going to be short term. Once the complications set in, that happiness is going to fragment. And secondly, if I know it's going to hurt you, or there's a high chance, a risk that it's going to hurt you, why would I applaud that? I don't want my son to complicate his life, which he's going to clearly be doing here because the girl's 18. How likely is it that this relationship will last? If you look at the surveys, if you look at the baseline prediction, very low. Very low. So I guess the overall point to be made here is so very, very often, it is not only a moral question of how you conduct yourself, but it's a life question. Because if the church is right, if Jesus is God, then he knows the best way to live. And to the degree you go against that, because it's convenient, because it's something you want to do, because you think the church is wrong about this, to the degree that you go against that, you're going to complicate your own life. Some people look back and they connect the dots and they say, yes, I see now what this resulted from my earlier decisions. Some people don't. They don't. They make the same foolish moves. They move in with somebody else and never connect the dots. Dr. Ray, thank you. Trying to find something by the poet Robert Burns. I think it was him. I'll find out. Producer man Andrew Kruchek might be able to find it. Steve from Washington called, and he was asking, how do I get the log? Our Lord talks about that. Get the log out of your own eye before you reach to take the speck out of somebody else's. Another one of our Lord's insightful visions, which says, Yeah, we give ourselves a lot more leeway. We don't see ourselves as we are, but I'll tell you what, I can certainly see you. I can scrutinize you. Don't want to turn that mirror on me, though. So Steve's asking, this is a bad habit. I don't like it.
So to give you just a little bit of history of myself, I remember when my wife told me one time that when I would ask somebody a question, I would basically try to steer the question I would basically try to steer that person to answering the question in the way I wanted to have them answer it. So my biggest fault right now is, and admittedly, over a few years back, I did have a hard time admitting that I was wrong. I have overcome that, and I can do that. I can admit I'm wrong very easily now. And I'm not looking for any sort of a crutch to lean on for you to say, oh, well, this is your problem and that's a crutch to lean on. I don't believe in that kind of stuff. But my biggest question right now is, especially at my workplace, I have one gentleman that I seem to always want to look at the speck in his eye and not pull the beam out of my own eye. I had an incident with him just yesterday, and I went back and I apologized to him, and he said, well, Steve, before you apologize, I need you to look at yourself. And he labeled a few things that I did, and he was just absolutely spot on. So just mostly looking for some insight on how I can overcome the fact that I always seem to think of somebody else's problem before mine and make a big deal about their problem, if my question is making any sense.
It is. I'll give you a quick answer. If you want to practice being wrong, call in and disagree with me. Okay, that'll train you to accept that you can be wrong. Now, if that's not doable on a daily basis, and let's look at this a couple other ways. First of all, I got to compliment you on your willingness to say, "Do I do that?" That is a wonderful characteristic, my friend. That is by far the first step in self-improvement.
Yeah, I had to go back to apologize to him because I knew that I was wrong.
And when you told him, okay, you're right, I apologize, and what you say is right, did he say, oh, shut up, I don't want to hear it? Or did he say,
no. No, he was very, very cordial and just very constructively brought up some of the things that was my end of it. Yes, and I had to agree with him. Yeah.
There you go.
Non-confrontational. Mm-hmm.
And I gotta tell you, my guess would be that his admiration for you went up a notch.
Hopefully.
Yeah, and his tolerance for you probably went up a notch too. It takes a lot of people to say, you're right, I do that, and I'm sorry, and I'm going to work on that. Okay, that's the first thing. Second thing, you did something that with your wife you could extrapolate to trusted people. She said, hey, Steve, you don't really ask people a question. You nudge them to agree with you. Okay? and I'll tell you what, I see that among these high-priced anchors and talking heads. They do this. They don't ask a question of the person they're interviewing. They give their perspective, and then they wait for the person they're interviewing to somehow dovetail with their perspective. I see that a lot, and you're not even getting paid millions to do it. If you're open to feedback from somebody else, even if you think it's ridiculous, even if you think I don't do that, even if you think, yeah, well, they ought to look at themselves, it's got to focusing on me. Get the log out of your own eye. If you're open to it, and you go away like you did with that guy, and you go away thinking, yeah, now that I'm calm and I'm thinking about it, they had a good point. Okay, if this deserves apologizing, I'm going to apologize. You do that, it becomes a habit. It becomes a trait. It becomes a style.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you, people really are attracted to folks who can look at themselves and they trust that you can say, yeah, I do that, don't I? I don't know if it was the poet and the social commentator Robert Burns who said this. I don't know. It's sticking in my mind that it was him. For those of you who can look this up very quickly and realize I'm wrong, I already pre-apologize. But somebody said, oh, the gift the gods would give us to see ourselves as others see us. Steve was asking, why do I do this? Why am I so much more inclined to look at somebody else's frailties and faults, foul-ups, than my own. Now, the simple answer to that is because our self-image and ego is not involved. If it's something wrong with you, that's no threat to me. That's you. That's your deficiency. If it's mine, it's my deficiency. And that's a lot harder to acknowledge. A lot. And we have defenses. Of course, we have all kinds of defenses. Who are you to tell me this? I don't do that. You're too sensitive. I don't get where you're coming from with that. We have all kinds of defenses. It comes down to trusting the source. I trust my wife. I'm a lot more outgoing and extroverted than she is. I wish I had some of her restraint. But my wife will point out things to me that I think are just, that's not a problem. Heck, yeah, people are going to like that, right? For example, small example. Raised Italian. When you're Italian, you stop in on anybody at any time. And it's all excited. You put the coffee on, get there. Well, I did that with some people that I consider very close friends. And my wife noticed that they didn't appreciate that. Maybe the woman didn't have her makeup on. I don't know what it was. But she said, Ray, as much as you think that's a good thing, it's not a good thing for everybody. And she was right. And I had to get to the point where I admitted I was wrong. I was wrong. I thought I was just doing something really nice, and it turned out, no, that was a miscalculation. Now, that's a minor thing, but there are other things that she points out to me, because I trust her. She's not pointing them out to me to in any way put me down or in any way show herself as superior. She's doing it because she wants to protect me from some of my own faults. If you have trusted people in your life, I highly recommend. Sometimes you become blatant. Do I do that? Do I sound like that? Somebody said I was arrogant. Do I come off that way? Can you give me some examples? That takes a real chipping away at that log in your eye. Matter of fact, you better take a chainsaw to it, because that's hard. But if you recognize that's what God wants, He wants you to be open to improve. And the only way you're going to improve is you're going to hear stuff you don't want to hear. And God is pleased with that. You may not be pleased with it. I may not be pleased with it because I don't want to hear where I'm wrong or where I fall short or what my frailties are or what I think I'm such a great guy and I find out what? I'm not? Oh, come on. But I tell myself, God wants me to listen. Now, there are times people are going to tell you stuff that you honestly, after good self-scrutiny, you say, I don't think that's true. I think they're speaking out of their own perspective, insecurity. I'm really trying to be open to that, but that one just doesn't resonate. Okay. There are times when you have to make that judgment, but you don't carte blanche. Let's just throw a little French lingo there. Simply say, no matter what, I don't need to hear it. Dr. Ray, thanks for joining me.
Welcome back to the Doctor Is In program. Now, here's your host, that master of mustaches, the punisher of pretzels, that cyclone of psychology, Dr. Ray Gorendi. Hit it, Jerry.
No time for any more. I was right. There it is. Oh, the gift that God could give us to see ourselves as others see us. That was Robert Burns. Ha! That was one of my great trivia game victories. The question was, and this was a final question, can make or break your placing in the top three. And if you place in the top three, you get a gift certificate for food at the place. The song Auld Lang Syne. The words were from a poem written by this Scottish poet. I said Robert Burns. I had no idea why I said Robert Burns. It wasn't a matter of, oh yeah, that's Robert Burns wrote that. I remember that. I remember studying that in high school. The thing is, I did study it in high school, but it had long since been forgotten. But somewhere in the deep, cobwebby recesses of my neurological structure was his name. And my teammate said, "Are you sure?" And I said, "No. And I don't know why I said it, but I think that's it." And since nobody else had any other answer, we went with it, and we finished in first place. So Robert Burns, oh, the gift that God could give us to see ourselves as others see us. Now, obviously, different people see you differently. Some people think you are the most wonderful human being to walk the face of the earth, and other people don't want to have anything to do with you. So all of their perception has to go through their lens. Nevertheless, there's a couple things to consider. One, by any chance, do you get a consensus on the fact that you're a certain way? It isn't just your spouse who thinks this? Not just your grown kids who think this? Is there a bit of a consensus? We got 2 or more votes, like our Lord says. Get two people. That's one. Another one is this person saying this for your well-being? It isn't that they want to attack you. It isn't that they're defending themselves. It isn't that they're saying, yeah, well, you do this too. It isn't that. They care for you, and you trust them to care for you. So when they tell you something about yourself that you instinctively don't want to hear, you don't want to think that about you. We all have this idea that we're really kind of better than we are. I know the big thing is now poor self-image. We all have poor self-images. Actually, no, we don't. Actually, we think more highly of ourselves probably than is warranted. I think there's research that even says that. And by the way, just an aside, do you know who has what group has the most positive self-images? They've surveyed them. Incarcerated felons. Yes, they view themselves much more positively in many respects than would be realistically warranted. Fascinating, isn't it? Because for the longest time, the movement in psychology was, well, you got to think wonderful of yourself. You just think you're a beautiful human being, and if you think wonderful of yourself, then you'll be wonderful. They just have had a hard time getting support for that particular correlation. One of my prayers now, I ask God this a lot. I say, show me, please, who I am. Show me what sins I have I don't even know I have. Show me what I'm like that I'm totally unaware of. I beg him. I ask him. I say, I got to know these things. Please. How can I get closer to you if I don't know it? Or worse, if I'm unwilling to even entertain it. So, and there's Andrew Kruchek, my producer man. He's always willing to tell me where I am screwing up on this radio broadcast. Gladly, I think he does. Thank you so much for joining me. Good Lord permitting, I'll see you Monday. Walk with God and ask him to show you what your walk is like.
For information on Dr. Ray's presentations, books, and CDs, visit drray.com and follow him on Facebook and Instagram. The Doctor Is In is a co-production of Ave Maria Radio and EWTN Radio and carried across the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.